So, so much of the activity we're looking at on the charts in today is largely the IRA. What percentage of Russian-linked activity would you anticipate that the IRA represents? Is this half of everything they try to do, 90%, 10%? Who would have a sense of what we're not looking at when we're looking at the IRA activity?
We've looked at a number of different known disinformation campaigns, and we think the IRA folks are involved in a minority of them.
In a minority of them, you think that would be the case here as well?
I do. The thing we don't know, though, is how much of the IRA this is.
Ms. Rosenberger, do you want to comment on that?
I would just only add that we know from Special Counsel Mueller's indictment, actually, of the GRU, there is one section of that that notes that GRU operatives utilize social media accounts and fake websites that they created in order to spread hacked information and other kinds of weaponized information. So we certainly know that there are other actors. GRU is probably better at hiding their tracks than the IRA is. And so I think that just speaks to, again, how this is probably just one tip of the iceberg of what we're looking at.
So the early discussion clearly has moved from what the Russians were paying for, which appears to be a very small fraction of the impact they were having. Does anybody disagree with that? That is clearly, and this IRA activity is some fraction of the Russian activity in 2016, 17, and into 18. That would be, so I think the indictment, the Mueller indictment said that there were probably at least 80 IRA employees involved and millions of dollars involved in that effort. I don't know what, is that $5 million or $100 million? What amount of money do you think the Russians invested in this effort that was covered by the Mueller indictment? He uses the term millions of dollars. That could mean a lot of different things. Any idea of the activity you've looked at? What kind of investment of money and how many people that may have been involved in this?
We've done that audit globally. We believe that $500 million has been spent by the 40 governments that we've studied since 2010. In the Russian case, we think it's around 200 million US over this extended period for the full set of organizations behind the various campaigns.
And so Dr. Howard, on that topic, in the other countries you've looked at, who should we be looking at after Russia that are likely impacting our daily conversation in the country in some ranked order? Who would be the top 3 or 4 countries that you would believe would be most actively out there doing what Russia is also doing?
Well, in our research, we look at Turkey, China, Hungary, and Iran.
Dr. Kelly, you have a thought on that?
We believe there's a growing black market for people skilled in who have these dark arts, and they're employing them in their own countries, and they're also starting to get hired to work in other countries. So this is a critical challenge because the Russians may have been the first to effectively do this, but they're not the only players, and you'll have a black market of players who are mobile and can be hired by any actor.
Well, just to be sure I understand, Dr. Howard, the 40 countries, are these 40 countries you've looked at for outside activity or 40 countries that are participating in this kind of activity?
These are 40 countries that have organized disinformation campaigns in the sense of stable personnel with telephones and family benefits. These are formal organizations that do this work.
And how many countries do you think those 40 countries would be trying to influence activity in?
7 countries.
7 countries?
There's 7 authoritarian regimes that have dedicated budgets for disinformation campaigns targeting voters in other countries.
And how many other countries again?
Our audit of government expenditures covers 40 in total. It's usually the United States, Canada, Australia, the UK Germany that are the targets.
That are the targets. On Dr. Kelly's comment about determining attribution, you know, we have in our country, we are focused on defense. No administration has yet figured out what our offense should be. And I think one of those reasons is we have not figured out with certainty how we would determine where a cyber attack came from, as opposed to even cyber misinformation, which is a different kind of cyber attack. But vulnerable infrastructure, what we're seeing here is a vulnerable social media infrastructure that may be every bit as critical infrastructure as any of the other infrastructure we're trying to protect. Mr. Rosenberg, I'm going to let you have the last answer to my questions.
Senator, I would just note on that Russia is playing to its asymmetric advantage. This is a low-cost, high-reward kind of tactic. We need to also evaluate what are our own asymmetric advantages, and sometimes that's not responding symmetrically or in the same domain. So, for instance, when it comes to Russia, I think this is why imposing costs in the financial space in particular, we know that Putin cares most about his power, and his power rests on his money. And I think that looking at ways that we can dry up the sources of funding, both for these activities as well as for the regimes that are using them, is incredibly important. When it comes to China, things like reputational costs are very important. So I think this is why it's important that we put this conversation on the national security front in a broader strategic frame to identify our own asymmetric advantages so we can go on offense.